As of recording, Materialist has just released into theaters, which is Celine Song's sophomore feature following up Past Lives from 2022. Song is given a lot of clout as a screenplay writer, especially following Past Lives, because she earned a nomination for Best Original Screenplay at the Academy Awards. I walked away from this film very interested in the conversation around its screenplay because it's proven to be a lot more divisive than Past Lives. The general consensus around the more negative takes is that the film is too neat in its writing. It's too clean, sterile, and self-important for it to land the big, lofty, thematic swings that the film takes. This is positioning itself inside the rom-com genre, at least from the marketing, and it's trying to elevate itself into something more important. Let's start talking about some of the elements of the screenplay of Materialists, because I think it encapsulates a lot of the things that I teach on this channel, but it does this while also showing what could potentially be a double-edged sword of having very neat and clean writing. A tight screenplay is the number one thing I'm always looking for in a film. No matter how great the filmmaker, a poor screenplay will always sink a film. I love quotes from Akira Kurosawa about this, and I've liked a lot of the quotes I've seen from interviews coming from James Gunn about this as well, following an interview where he was asked about his approach towards which projects he's going to greenlight inside of his DCU. I'll always teach that a neat screenplay is better than a messy or a lazy one, but is there such a thing as being too neat with your screenplay? I think the problems can arise from this, and that's where I've always drawn some resistance from structuring guides like Save the Cat or A Hero with a Thousand Faces. They tend to lock your story into predetermined beats that are supposed to be met, which results in films that we've seen before, and they tend to exacerbate those trends that start seeping out of films. I think that while adhering to good structural principles, there needs to be room for the artist to come through and interject their voice and make changes that benefit their story. In the case of Materialists, I think the screenplay on a structural level is pretty strong. It has immediate conflicts introduced, it forces our protagonist to reckon a more internal transformation that's brought to bear through her external conflicts. It positions its three primary characters all on different sides of a single philosophical conflict. Its subplots support the ideas of the story, and no scene is irrelevant to the conversation. It has strong setups and payoffs throughout, and after an exploration of its ideas, the film does end on a note clearly designed by the author to express her feelings on the matter. So what is really left to be desired in Materialists? For starters, the film makes its thesis abundantly clear from the very beginning of the movie. We're wrestling with the idea that the dating process and marriage unions in the modern landscape are very contractual. We're wrestling with where love and commitment can come into play in a world ruled by material assets. Celine Song has made it clear in interviews that she's trying to present how shallow a lot of rom-coms present the idea of love, and how shallow our whole dating process really is in the modern era. We follow Lucy, who plays a matchmaker. She's setting up people who check each other's boxes on a materialistic level, but she cannot help them find actual love, and she can't even find her self-love. Our other two main characters, Harry and John, are encapsulations of these two opposites. Harry is wealthy, handsome, and flawless, in quotes, but struggles to carry compassion or genuine love. John, on the other hand, is broke, struggling, and temperamental, but he truly loves Lucy on the deepest level and is willing to commit to her for a lifetime. You never want to talk down to your audience or spoon feed them with what you're trying to say. Oftentimes your thematic through line should become clear throughout the course of the film, but these pieces that are laid out in Materialist are just transparent from the very start of the film, and they can feel a little bit binary. It's like whacking you over the head with what it's saying constantly. In the presentation of it all, it can feel more like the characters are talking to you, the audience, rather than actually living out the true conflicts of their life, and we're just witnessing that. While I think Lucy is a really strong protagonist, seeing as she's caught in the middle of these two ideas, and her external job as a matchmaker directly feeds into this conflict, more room for criticism comes up, justifiably so in my opinion, when we start talking about Harry and John. The approach to have these two characters opposing each other on the spectrum of the philosophical conflict is correct in my opinion as a principle, but they can come off a little too rigid and binary, and thus they feel like pieces of the argument rather than real people. That's really what we mean when we say writing can be too neat. Neither of these characters really have an arc throughout the story. They stay the same and just serve to cause the change within Lucy. There's even a scene where Lucy comments to John that he's just as she remembers him from the past, and that frustrates him because he wishes that he could have changed over time. It's somewhat comedic considering the nature of his character, but it's also relevant to the tightness of the script. So given that the film is about economics and living in New York and finding your partner, each of these three pieces really feel elevated and a little bit detached from reality. I've seen some people say that it feels completely out of touch with its subject matter, but I don't completely agree with that because at the end of the day, within its little bubble, I still find that the film makes its point effectively, and I think that it's a very fun ride going along with that. I never found myself bored or annoyed by the film personally. I was wrestling with the fact that the film never really surprised me with the directions that the character took, but at the same time, I don't think that something has to be surprising to be effective and done professionally. It was the sort of progression that I was looking for coming into the film. I do think that the highly professional direction and the dialogue pacing is pretty key in still making the screenplay work in the way that it does. There's a slow but consistent cadence to the film, one that lacks some of the kinetic energy that you might be looking for out of a classic rom-com or a screwball comedy, but it's more of a somber and elegant pace, which I think worked for me because it was just consistent in what it was doing. It was consistent in its vision. On a filmmaking level too, I think that this was an upgrade from Past Lives, presenting some really great blocking, visual design, long takes that conveyed everything in a really engaging manner. The sound design was assisting in the edit of the film. It was very professional, and all around I think that it's a bar far higher on a technical level than what we see out of your average romantic comedy. On that note, the film was presented as a rom-com, and I get that some people are upset about the fact that it has a surprising lack of jokes and comedy. It's a little bit more dour, but I don't think that the film itself was really going for being a rom-com in that way. I think that that was a pull by the marketing team to try and sell more tickets, honestly, and I don't think that's something we should necessarily hold against the film in itself when it was consistent in its tone and its vision. The inherent conflict that comes from a love triangle existing in this film is discarded alarmingly early in the film, with her making her choice about who she wants to be with far before the climax of the film. A similar element was found in Past Lives, and in that movie, the protagonist's choice was tied to the conclusion, which felt emotionally conclusive in a more traditional and well-rounded emotional way. I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, though, in this case, that it is left earlier. It's treated as a sort of midpoint shift that propels a new journey of conflict resolution between Lucy and the other character, one of the guys who she chooses, which I'm not going to spoil here. I think the film is more interested in the journey for Lucy than the love triangle itself. That's not a decision that you would find in a Save the Cat model, right? It's something that was clearly designed and kind of breaks some traditional concepts of structure, but I think it worked for me all right because it was serving the character's purpose in the story at the right times. We're going to talk spoilers here for just a second, so if you want to skip over any potential spoilers, just skip to the next timestamp and you'll be good. There's a key subplot in the film where one of the clients that Lucy sets up to go on a date gets assaulted in the middle of the date, and despite her match checking all of the boxes she was looking for, it happened. So this sends Lucy into regret and despair. She's spiraling, and there's a progression where she tries to reach out to her personally to apologize and move forward with her as a friend and a client. This naturally causes Lucy to question the logic of looking at a relationship as math. The numbers matched up, but this clearly can't be all you're looking for because of the result that she got from this match. I've seen a lot of flack come towards this subplot as a central point of criticism, but honestly I think it's the most effective point of conflict probably in the entire film, despite it also being the darkest note of the film tonally. Bringing us back to how I said that this film feels a little bit elevated out of reality, the way that the subplot chooses to end really tosses all consequence out of the window, or at least it disregards it in an unrealistic way in order to serve Lucy's immediate relational conflicts. It's a decision that very much makes the film feel out of reality, and it makes the subplot feel like a mechanic for the story more than an organic interaction, if that makes sense. That being said, I still think it works really well for the overall story. You can just feel it working the story, if that makes sense. And that's really what it all comes down to, for it being a story about people and finding the balance between love and the material assets in life. It feels oddly mechanical. You can feel the film running like an engine, and you can recognize those cracks. And it's really just going to be up to each individual person if that bothers you or not. With all of that being said, I'm going to watch this film any day over your average rom-com that to me are usually pretty disposable, and they don't often challenge me on a thematic, moral, or philosophical idea, which is what I'm really looking for out of a movie. After walking out of the theater with my girlfriend and her sister, we all had somewhat different takes on how we felt about the themes of the story, about what is right, what was wrong, what we would have done in this situation, who made the right choices. And at the end of the day, I couldn't really ask for a lot more than that. I don't want a film where we all just agree on it and move on with our day. But I do think that you can craft a film that kind of hides its ideas a little bit better under the surface, so it doesn't feel like it is just a conversation about these ideas. But that's just me. I mean, I was moved. I really enjoyed my experience with the film. I thought it was very professionally crafted, and it's causing some really good conversations, both about the themes and on how to write good screenplays. I think feelings either way about the film are justified, and that edge to an extent that the film has kind of makes it more of a worthwhile conversation to me. The last thing I'll say is that I think it's a lot harder to write a screenplay that's substantive, nuanced, and worthwhile that ends in a positive light. In such a broken world, I think that being dire is an easier sell, and I respect this film a lot for tackling such real and dark subject matter, but also choosing to end it in the way that she does. It takes a lot of skill to pull that off, and to me at least, I think that Celine Song did pull it off. Thanks for watching this episode, guys. I would recommend all of you go out and watch Materialist in theaters if you can, or if it's already out of theaters, I'd recommend you renting it, buying it, checking it out. I think it's a good watch, and I think it'll create some good conversations for you. It's pretty accessible and very worthwhile. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please consider liking and subscribing, or if you thought it could have been better, give me some constructive criticisms in the comments below and tell me what I can do to be better next time. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you later.